Why does entropy increase as time goes on? Yet living beings seem unaffected by it, by the increase in entropy. Well, it's because living beings... Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video I wish to talk about the anomalous character of life, the improbability of life if you wish, or like an anomaly of survival or something like that. So, as you may remember, in one of my main videos called The Nature of Knowledge, I'm gonna link this video on every other video I mentioned in the description. So, Nature of Knowledge, I talk about how initially, it seems like, at least, humans were perceiving pretty much all the world as being alive, right? Everything was made of spirits, so to speak. The tree was alive, the river was alive, the stone was alive, etc., etc. Whereas afterwards, in modernity specifically, humans started perceiving the world as a bunch of mechanisms, essentially. Basically dead stuff, right? And since then, so initially, living things were normal, right, in the universe, in perception of humans at least, whereas afterwards, in our, more or less modern scientific paradigm, we have the living things are actually abnormal, because everything should be mechanistic, right? So this interesting switch kind of happened. So now living, or life, is an anomaly, according to modern scientific dogma, that is. And what is life characterized by is decrease in entropy, right? So it's a concept that Erwin Schrödinger, the same Schrödinger that developed the Schrödinger's equation and has been one of the founding fathers of quantum mechanics, as you know. So in his book, What is Life?, he has coined the concept of negentropy. That is negative entropy, or denial of entropy, right? The export of entropy that living beings possess. So what they do is, again, they decrease their own entropy at the cost of increasing entropy elsewhere, right? Throwing waste outwards, so to speak. And I've actually kind of examined these points to quite a bit of detail in my video Onion of Aliens. Again, I'm gonna link probably part 1 in the description, but there are 3 parts actually. Maybe I'll link all of them. So in case you wanna know my stance on aliens, there's a whole bunch of stuff over there. Okay, so living beings decrease entropy, right? That's one way of looking at them. That's why they're anomalous, because second law of thermodynamics claims that the isolated system should increase its entropy. Of course, you might say, well, blah, 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 living beings are not isolated systems. So, of course, technically, they aren't violating second law of thermodynamics, at least on the surface, all right? And another Erwin, this time Bauer, not Schrödinger, has also coined another interesting concept, which is called stable non-equilibrium. So that was his pretty much definition of life. He has a book called Theoretical Biology, which is an interesting take in the first place, right? So he said that life is in a state of stable non-equilibrium. There are types of equilibria, I guess, equilibriums. So there's a stable equilibrium and unstable and irrelevant equilibrium. But he coined the term stable non-equilibrium, right? So it's kind of backwards, so to speak. So life is in a state of a stable non-equilibrium, indeed. So in a way, it defies thermodynamics again. One of the main concepts of thermodynamics, for example, is temperature. And from it also entropy stems, among other things, right? But how temperature is defined, actually there is no good definition of temperature. But one prerequisite of any definition of temperature that you should have is having a thermodynamic equilibrium. And if life is by definition a state of non-equilibrium, you cannot ascribe any entropy to life, neither any temperature, to life, neither any entropy, actually. So if you look a bit deeper, it all starts falling apart, all these scientific concepts, when applied to life. But at least Schrödinger has noted that there is already some sort of problem, that life seems to actually export entropy into the outside world, kind of defying, but not really, laws of physics, right? Something like that. Yeah, so, and there's a problem with this, not only on individual level, the problem in description from scientific positions, that is, but also as an ensemble, as a collective, you might say. So life is also problematic. Obviously, the survival of species, as I also note in my onion of aliens videos, the survival of species is incredibly improbable, right? So as paleontology shows us, like around 99% of all the known species are extinct. So actually extinction is the normal state of species. So survival is actually an anomaly, if you wish, right? Like 1% level of anomaly. I mean, the probability is 1%, roughly speaking, right? So life is not normal according to physics, at least. It's not, of course, as I've said, not really prohibited by physics, at least strictly, but it kind of bypasses all the limitations thereof, right? So life can't really be contained, right, like in a box and be studied like this. It always overflows, right? While physics needs to isolate stuff, exactly, like put it in a box. Also, I remember my video about the numbers, how numbers relate to the real world, where I say that, well, you need, in order to be able to calculate stuff, you need to like contain it, right? Where I also make a claim that time makes numbers irrelevant, and we'll return to the issue of time at the very end of this video. So, personal survival is not normal either. Personal meaning human. Well, not only human actually, but human as well. It happens despite all the odds, and especially, I should note, if we're talking about humans, it happens despite the odds in males, because again, male mortality is much higher. Males are the forefront of the population in genetic sense. They are the untested yet material, genetic material. That's why all the, how do you call it, like the premature, like unhappy pregnancies, let's put it this way, are males, right? Because again, males are some new stuff, badly, like not yet tested stuff, right? More mutations in males, etc., etc. See my video about gender, by the way, if you wish to know more details. It's very, very like thorough in terms of the analysis of the problem. So less males survive, and therefore the surviving males, and especially like successfully surviving males, are super popular, right? Like super valuable, you might say. So that's why only a top small percent of men get pretty much all the women, right? And it's a very natural state of being. So so life is improbable, yet there it is, right? So hence, again, in my video, I'm sorry for so many self-quotes, but in my video, probability versus possibility, or vice versa, I don't remember. So I talk about the necessity, actually, to talk about possibility rather than probability. Like, probability is a scientific concept, yes, but science, as we can see, cannot deal with many things, with many problems. One of such problems is the existence of the universe itself, right? Or the existence of life, or the existence of me, or the existence of you by the same token, right? So according to science, you shouldn't exist, actually, right? The probability of it is indistinguishable from zero, let's say. And also watch my video on medicine, where I talk about how science is inapplicable to treatment of anyone, really. It treats like an average human being. It operates with statistics, not with your health, actually, unfortunately. All right. So life exists, we may say, following from all of this, despite all of these laws, all the physics, all the science, rather than thanks to it. All right. Though formally, as I've said again, and I'm going to repeat this, it doesn't contradict physics, at least directly. So yeah. And as you may remember, my video where I talk about the end of Western civilization, also see the link, all the links in the description. So the point of Western civilization is to be in constant crisis, right? Which means it's like kind of walking on edge, right? Being super anomalous, so to speak, being like impossible in a way, right? But it is exactly like the most alive state from what I've described above, right? So you are most alive when you are most improbable. And Western civilization, as like being in permanent crisis, like on the verge of downfall, but being on this verge for like hundreds of years, if not thousands, depending on your view of history. Like, it's exactly that. It's being the most alive, actually. So yeah. And to a degree, without further elaboration, I would add that the model of Western governance is actually based on that. It is consecutive engineering of crises. So let me talk about culture for a moment. Culture is, we might say, a continuation of life, as I've described it beforehand. So it is defiance, you might say. It is the revolt. It is building up against the erosion, against laws of physics, you might say, if you are like feeling dramatic, right? Countering the entropy. Remember, like in one of my older videos, I talked about one of the like manifestations of culture is exactly that, like lowering the entropy. Actually, I would define culture itself as ways of lowering entropy, period, right? Like look at, like pretty much anything in culture can be explained through that. Like, for example, look at how we separate our rooms, how we like, you know, build our houses, right? Theoretically, you can have one room where you would do everything. Like you would eat, sleep, like have fun, do some other things there, right? You would, I don't know, like, but it would look pretty garbage, right? Everything would be mixed up, unseparated. But that would be a state of high entropy. It would be disorder. Like here you eat and here you like do the other stuff with the food that you've already digested, right? It's bad to keep it all like in a single room. So that's why we separate these rooms, right? In one room we eat, in another we sleep, in the third we do this other stuff, right? And whatever, like, I mean, you can develop this concept to much further, right? The same things we do pretty much with everything, right? We have, again, it's culture. It's like the development, the differentiation. Like one branch is when we have one room where we do everything, then it kind of branches out to many others, more like specialized rooms, right? That do separate stuff, isolated. So yeah, the same goes with time, right? How we separate our, for example, year into like months and weeks and seasons, right? Today's my birthday. Not really. I mean, I'm just saying it as an example. So, like today's my birthday. Well, it means some people need to bring gifts. I need to make a party or whatever. They need to congratulate me. So it's also like countering the entropy, right? It's not a random day. It's my birthday. Like it's some special day, right? Like the other 364 days, everyone doesn't care about me, but today I receive a couple of messages, at least on Facebook, right? So, that's lowering the entropy. No messages, boom, all the messages. No messages, then a year later, boom, all the messages, etc. So you get the idea, right? So, yeah, what was I even talking about? Yeah, ordering of space and time, essentially, right? And everything else, pretty much. Ordering of our activities, like, blah, blah, blah. Don't want to linger on this too much. And one interesting offshoot of this is luxury. So, luxury is a part of culture which represents something unnecessary, really, if you think about it. Like actually by definition of luxury, right? It's unnecessary, something unnecessary existing, again, despite being not needed. It's sort of like just because I can type of stuff, right? You have it just because you can. This is the luxury by definition. So a peacock's tail, right? It's a luxury. It actually not only doesn't help, it actually actively hinders peacock, right? It's actually actively bad for him, or him, right? It's males, right? With tails. Yeah, so, and it like taxes you, right? But what does it mean? Like, why do you need to be taxed this way? Well, in case of actual luxury, it could be like physical assets, it could be like, art or beliefs or like clothing, you know, like you wear like a super uncomfortable clothing, but just to look cool, right? So kind of like actual peacocking. So, and like unnecessarily cool, you might say, right? Something like that. So, yeah, and it all comes down to the same flex, essentially. So we're so, like, it's a statement saying we are so strong, so alive, returning to what I've said above, that we can actually sustain any sort of damage, and survive, right? Watch my video Bad Ending, where I address this topic of how people on the nature of masochistic pleasure, essentially, right? How sustaining damage, like feeling yourself sustaining damage and like living through it, overcoming it, actually gives you a feeling of power and therefore pleasure, right? So yeah, and it's the same with luxury. Like, I'm so stupidly strong and rich, possibly, that I can afford this completely useless piece of crap, right? That it's actually maybe actively harmful for me because I need to sustain it, I need to clean it or do whatever. But again, it's a symbol of power, right? So it's a flex again. And in modern culture, of course, we have the so-called luxury beliefs, which is a term coined by Rob Henderson. I'm going to link his article in the description so you can read his thoughts on this. But in our culture, we have these beliefs. Like, what is luxury beliefs? Well, it's like peacock's tails. It's something that actually actively hinders us, possibly. So it's kind of a wrong belief that we hold because we are so strong that we can even hold a wrong belief and still survive, right? Something like that. Like, it could be beliefs like, family is bad, right? Let's destroy nuclear family. Or like homosexuality is a normal, right? So it's like an average human being could be a homosexual and it's fine. Whereas, I mean, if you would implement this in reality, if like 50% of your society would be homosexual, like it would die out like in 50 years, right? There would simply be not enough humans remaining. Or at least like the population would drop significantly with everything connected to that. Like the economy would stagnate and the culture would stagnate and everything else. So yeah, okay, so yeah, speaking of like masochistic pleasure and like being alive as like an improbable stuff, right? Let me bring us to our, let me start my concluding remarks by quoting Seraphine, actually.
We get as close to death as we can to feel alive.
And yeah, makes sense, doesn't it? So it's kind of like, you know, actually, Samira might confirm this. Wait.
I feel most alive when I'm walking the line.
Makes sense, doesn't it? So, it's like a tree, you know, like a tree looking at, like bending over and looking at its roots, right? What does it see? Like, holy shit, I'm so tall. Like, how did I get so tall? How did I defy gravity so much, right? How did I survive this? Why am I still standing, right? Or like, imagine like you or just a random person, like surviving again by some terrible accident and like living through it, right? They might think also like, how am I still alive? And even you may think even about your own life. Like, remember that there are probably many moments where you could have screwed up a lot, right? But you're still alive. So yeah, and it brings you to this feeling that, holy shit, I'm so alive, right? It brings you to the realization of how improbable life is, how anomalous it is, and therefore you feel the most alive because you're finally acknowledging the fact that life is a miracle and it's an anomaly. It's improbable. It shouldn't exist, actually, right? According to like normal, whatever, according to the norms, you might say. So yeah, and it's the biggest, I would say, paradox or even a tragedy of life is that we take it for granted, yet it is a miracle, right? So let me end with an analogy of how science perceives life with regards to entropy and things like that. So kind of trying to sum up all that I've said previously. So, but mostly focusing on entropy. So imagine a scientist trying to study a restaurant. And what they do is they just walk around, like not just go through the main entrance, they walk around it to the backyard, and they just sit there in the backyard and wait. And like, they came to the like 6 a.m. when the restaurant opens. I mean, whatever the restaurant it is. Let's assume it opens at 6 a.m. So the scientist comes at 6 a.m. and sits there in the backyard and just watches like the back door, right? And he sees like, every now and then, like, people leave, like, one of the staff members perhaps leaves the restaurant, exits the restaurant and throws some garbage out, right? And goes back in. Then they go back out and throw some more garbage. And the process repeats until the restaurant closes, and then scientist says, oh, well, okay, my work is done, I've observed enough. So what their conclusion is that what happens is the entropy increases, right? There's more and more garbage as time goes on. And this is how physics perceives pretty much everything, right? Including life. Like, they see like, well, there's more and more garbage as time goes on. But unfortunately, as you can see from this example, what they're missing is actually like the main point, actually, right? How a restaurant works. Why does it work? What is it doing? Like, does it generate wealth even? Because it does, right? Obviously, since the garbage is being thrown out. So, the science misses the main point. So, why is entropy increases? Why does entropy increases as time goes on? Yet living beings seem unaffected by it, by the increase in entropy. Well, it's because living beings are made of time. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing. If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.